A child picks his way, barefoot, through the rubble of the school where he'd been living. Yet another compound sheltering displaced Palestinians targeted in an Israeli strike. Families, distraught, surrounded by their meagre possessions, wonder where they're meant to go now. We pulled my children out from under the rubble, cries this woman. A curse be upon Israel. The school caught fire, she says. It was burning. I don't know who's still alive and who died. A UN report today accused Israel of an unprecedented level of violations of international law in Gaza and said over 8,000 victims whose identities have been verified by the UN so far, 70% were women and children. The report was also critical of Hamas, which continues to hold Israeli hostages. Traumatized and terrified, this young girl lashes out at Hamas too. A blood-stained slab of concrete lies beneath her feet. Israel insists it only targets fighters from the group. Were any in this school in Gaza City? We don't know. What is clear is the awful impact of the strike on it. Here they're collecting fragments of hair and body parts to try and bury what's left of the victims. As you can see, we're gathering the remains of people, this man says. Innocent people who had nothing to do with anything. We're gathering the pieces of a woman and her daughter. They were torn apart. It's in Gaza's northernmost region that the destruction is at its apocalyptic worst. No food aid has been allowed in here for the past month. Israel's accused of starving residents out, which it denies. Around 100,000 Palestinians have fled Israel's intensified assault on the north, but tens of thousands still remain. Many fear no one will ever be allowed back. Some of the displaced had been seeking shelter in the school that was struck. Little children are lying torn apart in the courtyard, this woman cries. Where is Trump? What will he do for us? Let him help us. Will anyone bring an end to the suffering here? Suddenly, the thud of explosions in the distance sends the crowd running. But where to find safety? Nobody knows.
Well, earlier I spoke to Jan Egeland from the Norwegian Refugee Council, who's just returned from Gaza. He's a former UN Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief, and I began by asking him for his impression of the situation there.
Well, I was really shattered when I came to Gaza and saw how destroyed this urban land is. At the same time, the population is being starved. We're getting very little aid in, and the aid we're getting in cannot really be distributed.
I mean, the Israelis continue to say that aid is getting in. They obviously accuse people of looting it. They say that is nothing to do with them. Give us a sense of how much aid you have been able to see is getting in relative to how much is actually needed.
And I think it's a crucial point. I mean, you're a journalist that have been denied access to Gaza throughout. But Israel is still, able to have all of its non-truths presented through all world media. There is no aid coming through. Even the Americans acknowledged that there were 30 trucks per day in October. That is nothing. They say they are not responsible for the looting. Well, they smashed the civilian police and they're not securing the roads. They are targeting anyone that is suspicious, but not the looters. And then they also say we have a targeted operation against military people only. So how come it's been documented now by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights that 70% of all the tens of thousands that are dead are women and children? Do not believe the Israelis, nor Hamas, nor Hezbollah. They are parties to a very dirty war.
And of course it is civilians, it is ordinary men, women and children who are suffering. Give us a sense of what they are living through at the moment.
Nearly 90% of Gaza's population has been displaced from their homes. Children are malnourished. There is more and more epidemic disease. You see people dying massively from preventable disease already. The hospitals are bombed. There is no sanitation. People are crammed together. They live on top of each other, and there is no escape.
What needs to happen now when you look ahead to the winter?
Number one, we need a ceasefire. Not a day more, then release of the hostages that Hamas is still holding, and then very many arbitrarily arrested by the Israelis, simultaneous opening of many border crossings. We could aid everybody overnight if we had access. Finally, the beginning of a peace.
שרצה להרגיש את רפיח ולא הלך לו.